Well, this one's probably going to be pretty short. Well, I can't promise that, but we'll see. I didn't get very far at any rate. I moved on to controlling entities. You can get somewhere around like 2,000 entities reasonably easily. The problem comes when you want to do something like I want to do, which is have around 5,000 entities. Well, that was the goal that I had set for myself, and it's not working out too well. You're getting 14 frames a second. So I started looking into ECS, Entity Component System, and it's really low level. It allows for parallel processing, and I thought, well, this is going to work. And it's just much tougher to wrap my head around than I thought it would be. So I found an example here, which is very complicated, very in-depth, uses a lot of old, outdated conventions and deprecated code, and tried to wrap my head around how this would work. I'm going to go ahead and spawn 10,000 people, and it can handle it. But I have a problem with it in that there's no collision. Entities will just walk through each other. Now this example is supposed to have a local avoidance system. They'll still end up doing this exact same behavior, walking through each other. So you can see how they're funneling through and just basically walking through each other. If I change the avoidance diameter to 1, if I change it to 1,000, it doesn't matter. They're still going to just walk into each other. Well, there may be a slight bit of difference. As you can see, they're like making like a little bit fatter lines. They're not all walking in one straight line. But this isn't collision in the sense that I want it. I need these units to be aware of each other's position. So what I opted to do was to create a nav mesh obstacle and carve. The problem with this is that it crashes. It's just too much to handle, apparently. I'm not sure exactly what's going on, but if I turn carving on, I'm going to put this to a really low number so that you can see that carving's working. So you can see, look at how slow we're chunking along. I think it probably just crashed right there. You can see the carving's working. And that's how I was going to go about doing collision. But it doesn't work. But as you can see, it doesn't work. It just craps itself. It's gone. So what I opted to do was start from scratch and write my own system. Well, I didn't write my own system. I piggybacked off of someone else's system just to sort of figure out what the hell was going on with ECS and see if I could figure out how to manipulate the data. And the wall I ran into was shared data. What I opted to do was, he has an AABB collision system, which is an axis aligned bounding box collision system, which basically just puts a box around your character, and if those boxes cross, well, there's a collision. I took that system and augmented it with a spatial partitioning system. So what that does is, so every time our axis aligned bounding box moves, we do a hash of the position. And that gives us a hash that will correlate to that location as an int value. So we're going to have cells that are 1 by 1. So what I wanted to do was take this, put it into a map, and then in my collision system right now I have to check every single entity, and that eats up a lot of processing. I would only have to check entities that are in the same cell, but I could not for the life of me figure out how to put data into this map. It's a native multi-hash map. I couldn't figure out how to put data into it. I couldn't figure out how to pull data out of it. I couldn't figure out how to delete data out of it. It was just driving me nuts. Tired of banging my head against the wall. I think I'm just going to have to move on to using old school Unity heavyweight tools just to make some progress. But as you can see, I'm comparing the hash, and the collision works exactly the same as if I would use the bounding box, basically. I'll show you that they're basically the same. So this is with my spatial partitioning, and I'm spawning quite a bit of units, and for some reason they just start going, but you can see all the entities swarm on one area, which is exactly what I want. If I go back to the axis aligned bounding box, you're going to see the same behavior. So as you can see, it has basically the same effect. The axis aligned bounding boxes have a larger, or probably a more precise, collision area is probably the thing that's going on. So they're colliding more often. If I could figure out how to store the data in a map and pull that data out, I would be able to limit the number of entities that I have to check, and then I could actually move forward with this. But right now, just to prototype things out, I know that I can make the baked map work along with carved obstacles for the entities, and it will work up to a certain point. I can probably get somewhere around 1,000 entities to work with this system, and fake a larger number of units with textures that include animations for a bunch of units, and basically destroy those units by modifying the texture so that it looks like there's more units than there are, basically, is what I'm saying. I would have to discourage anybody from using ECS. It's in flux so much right now that all the information, at least half of the information that I'm seeing about ECS, is already outdated. I'm looking at stuff from October of last year, and it's already deprecated. You can't run the code until you've upgraded it, so the structure's always in flux right now. They haven't decided on anything final. So I'm tired of banging my head against the wall, because even if I do learn this system, it's probably going to change. It's the kind of thing that I do, is to go down the rabbit hole and just try and make something completely the way that I want it. And at this point, I think it's probably a good idea just to realize that I'm going to have to make concessions in order to make progress. So I think I should probably focus on the gameplay at this point and trying to make something function so that I can see what it's going to maybe look like at this point. So that's it. That would be my advice. Don't fuck with ECS. That's about all I could say, unless you're a guru. Everybody that I saw and read on the forums was really knowledgeable and seemed to know what they were doing, but I did tend to see the same 5 or 6 people, which is kind of weird. So that lets you know how many people are actually out there in the community talking about ECS and getting things done. It's teams that are actually getting stuff done, not one-man bands, because it gets they make it seem like it's very simple, but you have to write every system. You have to account for everything, and the way the systems work is they're always on, or you have to qualify them. So it's just really hard to wrap your head around something so different. So I'm done with that. I'm moving on. I'll link the examples that I used to learn what little I did about ECS, so that maybe you guys can learn something. One of them is a YouTuber with a series of videos that was the most helpful of everything. Really brought it down to my level, which is apparently pretty low. And so yeah, look for those in the description. Hope you learned something. I'll see you next week.